Joe Rogan brought Oliver Anthony on. Oliver Anthony is the guy who wrote that song. That all broke when I was on vacation.
Yeah.
So I didn't really
You weren't moved?
I wasn't as moved by it, but
did you see how the debate, the first 15 minutes was centered around the song?
I did not
Republican
actually. In
debate.
fact, I was putting Saul to sleep. I think that that very moment. But we can talk about that in a bit. But what's interesting about this exchange is that there's a lot of I don't want this incoherence in terms of like, and at least I don't know. Some of it is also motivated by Rogan's station in life, if you will. You'll recall when I went on that PBD show and said that we should be taxing people basically at the same rates we were during the 50s and the 60s, which was every dollar you made over your first, I think then it was $470,000. But that would be the equivalent of more or less $3 million. Every dollar you make over $3 million, you get taxed 90%. Now, a lot of libertarians will cry and say that was not the effective tax rate. The effective tax rate was 50%. The effective tax rate today is about half that. So, I mean, however you want to splice it up, we need much higher taxes on, at some point kicking in because we shouldn't have people concentrate that type of wealth. Here is how Rogan now understands. We've got to fight the man, but by man, I don't mean people who are making a lot of money like me.
No.
Here we go.
Well, I mean, it's a subject of discussion. So like everybody is getting involved, and then somehow or another it became cultural. And then there was Dwight from The Office.
Oh yeah,
he chimed in that if he was going to write a cultural.
Pause it for a second. I love the fact that like suddenly he's Dwight from The Office. I got news for you. This is the super for news radio. This is the guy who was like feeding people worms.
Yeah,
all right,
this is the Fear Factor guy.
Right.
Yeah, Dwight from The Office.
Yeah.
Say something like he wouldn't write about overweight people on welfare. He would write about billionaires and their taxes.
Yeah.
There is nothing funnier than millionaires talking shit about billionaires. There is nothing funnier about millionaires pretending these billionaires are out of touch.
Oh yeah.
And then, take Dwight from The Office down to West Virginia. Take him through those coal mining countries.
Can you pause it?
Take him through.
Take you down there, buddy. The difference, though, between actually someone like Dwight from The Office and someone like you is, I mean, well, I don't know. I guess Spotify is his corporate boss, right? But we come into there's often a conflict when certain like NFL fans are upset that the player is holding out because they're millionaires, right? They're millionaires. They should be grateful for what they do and for what they get paid for their job. But the reason that what's fundamentally wrong about that is that it's the billionaires who are choosing not to pay them because the billionaires are the ones who control capital.
The means of production.
Means of production. And so this is also a flattening of that power dynamic there too, where Joe Rogan's class consciousness is obviously hilariously terrible, but this is what they do to undermine the solidarity with actors as well, but with just fundamentally people who rely on people who own the means of production to make their living. And that is the difference here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a millionaire. What's funnier than a millionaire criticizing a millionaire who's also like on the side of labor and the billionaires on the side of capital is another millionaire like Joe Rogan caping for billionaires and defending them from criticism of the people that they pay. Like, that's pretty servile, actually.
And I will say this. I mean, speaking as both a non-billionaire and a non-millionaire, there is a fundamental difference. Like I said, 90% on every dollar you would get taxed in the 40s and 50s and 60s over $470,000. And now that would be $3 million in that. So you could over the course of 10 years, you can make $3 million, $30 million being taxed at, this sort of the rates that generally everybody is taxed at. And then anything above that, you'd basically get 10 cents on the dollar. And what that would do is it prevent you from amassing so much wealth that you had not just so much wealth, because I don't really care if Elon Musk or Bill Gates or whatever billionaire or Vivek like cake has a notion of like what people go through and this and that. I don't want them to have the ability, because of their money, to fundamentally change the lived experience of millions upon millions of people. That is fundamentally anti-democratic. And in this day and age, you can't do that if you have $30 million. You can't. You'll have a nice house. You'll be out of touch. You probably won't have a sense of what people go through on a daily basis. But you can't fundamentally alter, let's say, the trajectory of education in this country like Bill Gates did. You can't fundamentally derail large public investment in public transportation like Elon Musk has. And you can do that if you're a billionaire.
But if he leans back in his chair a little bit more, maybe people will forget that Spotify bought his show for $200 million.
So he actually deals pretty well with some of those people on the opposite end of Rainn Wilson.
He got a sweet deal out of that to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. So but man,
millionaires criticizing billionaires. That's so funny.
But
this dude has the aesthetic. He has the aesthetic.
Oh, an aesthetic.
He has the aesthetic in which he can go to West Virginia. I've been to West Virginia. I just took a trip through there.
Same. I denied some sushi.
We made it. Go ahead.
Because we're out of touch.
Oh yeah.
And then take Dwight from The Office down to West Virginia. Take him through those coal mining countries. Take him through those places in Appalachia where people have extreme poverty. And pills have ravished those areas. Take him through there.
And it's everywhere. Yeah, the sad thing is it's everywhere now. It's not. Yeah. It's funny. People right off the get-go, I guess because it was Radio WV that posted the original video, but I've never once advertised myself as being necessarily from the mountains. My grandfather grew up in western part of Virginia in the mountains, but I'm from Farmville, which is technically Piedmont. But even throughout rural Virginia, that poverty is a big issue and drugs are a big issue. And I mean, it's not just even in the rural areas. You go into downtown Richmond or any downtown anywhere for that matter. It's almost like these problems exist everywhere now and I think, obviously they are, because that's why the song resonated the way it did. Even in other countries. In other countries,
But people are tired of being fucked with, and it seems like people in power are always fucking with people. And I think it's a natural inclination that human beings have, and I think the founding fathers of this country recognized that when they set up our government. They set up our government to protect it against tyranny, and they did it by having all these different branches of government, and they're all coordinated, and there's a lot of fucking...
I hate to do this, but can we just say, the constitution of our government back then, was it really to guard against tyranny, broad, how we would imagine it now, or was it kind of instituted to maintain a slave?
Well, so Matt, you read a lot of history. Would you categorize slavery as somewhat tyrannical?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think actually that was not only something we've come to appreciate over the course of centuries, but also noted by the British, a few decades after that. This country says this all about freedom. Look at them maintaining slavery.
It was. The easiest way I think to look at it. It was designed to create more democracy than existed under a monarch.
Sure.
But not so much that those in the unnamed aristocracy, the money, our version of the aristocracy, which was a moneyed version, would lose power to people who didn't have money. Yeah, that's basically it.
Instead of the king, it's all of the large landowners who the king gave grant to.
Which is why, when you've made and let's be clear, I know how much money this guy made on a sitcom that was in syndication. He could have retired then. And he made a ton on Fear Factor. And now he's made even hundreds of millions of dollars. This guy's worth hundreds of millions of dollars and is now talking about tyranny. The Constitution was set up to protect your money. Yes. That's what it was set up for. Go ahead.
That was part of the origination of the Senate because they didn't want too much damn democracy.
Country recognized that when they set up our government. They set up our government to protect it against tyranny. And they did it by having all these different branches of government, and they're all coordinated, and there's a lot of stuff that keeps people from just running it the way they want to run it, like a king.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm certainly I'm no professional historian, but my understanding is that the federal government was never intended to be the size that it is today. Like, it's just, we're very top heavy in the way we're structured. You know, our federal government is enormous and out of control and almost impossible to manage. But then, like, on our community level and in our state government, things are, especially local government, things are just very neglected and weak and disconnected. And so, like, that's why you see a lot of the problems. Like, we shouldn't have to rely on the federal government to fix things out in the street in small town America. Like, the communities and the local government should be the ones fixing that. And that's the way I see things. Like, even before our current form of government, I remember reading about, like, Articles of Confederation, and that was just an even smaller version of federal government, but it needed to have a little more structure than that. But even from day one, it seems like the federal government's never supposed to be the size that it's gotten to. Like, that's
a good argument if the country didn't get to the size that it got. The problem is you can't have like 30 people running 300 billion people.
But I think you could have more issues. So, like, I think it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible for states to be able to have the control to make the right decisions for the people in their areas when the federal government limits them in so many different ways.
Pause it. This is just somebody who has been subjected to a bunch of propaganda.
Yep.
Because to the extent that the federal government has controls over these things, we're going to limit the amount of stuff that your big industrialist. And, you know, what's amazing, too, is when you think about, like, coming from West Virginia and having this perspective. West Virginia is so corrupt by big money that it is kept, and because they have these resources there that have been exploited by big money in that state, and has impoverished large swaths of people there for generations, centuries now, and century plus. And this is a function of corruption in state and local governments. Corruption in that, you know, Joe Manchin, owns is working for the company that's trying to exploit this and that. I mean, we could go through on and on with this.
Yes.
But the federal government, to the extent that it's trying to control, is saying, don't put so much mercury in the air.
Yeah.
Maybe separate your beef from the poop when you are processing it.
Yeah, right. That's the thing, is, like, there's a lot.
Provide health care for your citizens. Right. And here's 90% of the money to do so.
But that's the thing is like, I almost feel badly that this guy is being thrust into having this conversation. Who knows how this song got so big, and if it was AstroTurf with his knowledge or without it. But either way, he does not need to be going on Joe Rogan to be the voice of some sort of generation. That was the Republican Party cynically using a certain aesthetic to basically divert from the structural power dynamics that we talk about here, so they can make it about some sort of, like, flyover country, forgotten man cultural
Fudge.
thing, as opposed to really directing the anger towards the people that hold power in this country.
Right, and because there's things that are semi-agreeable, like the top-heavy thing. Well, if you're talking about the military, I agree with you. If you're talking about insurance programs, I don't agree with you. And also, like, the local control thing. Looking at this article from Texas GOP's broadest attempt yet to erode Blue City's power gets one step closer to becoming law. I doubt Joe Rogan's covered this. I'd be curious what Oliver Anthony thinks about it. Republican state leaders' broadest effort to prevent Democratic-run cities and counties from enacting progressive policies. Like, that was HB.
Oh, we've seen this in North Carolina. Did this
right.
to fend off a city ordinance that was going to have a minimum wage. I mean, we see it on and on.
Yes, and the systemic thing about why local politics are worse often than federal is that, or like more inept, is because they're cheaper to buy for the people.
Of course.
That are near it.
Of course. before the federal Supreme Court was bought by Harlan Crow and other billionaires, you go to the states in North Carolina, South Carolina, any place where there was an election for the state Supreme Court, you'll see big money had come in there and bought these elections already. Go ahead.
Thing about this, so I'm going to be talking out of my ass. But I would imagine
I am
probably
too.
low on funding too. There's probably a lot of issues, especially in places that are poor, because they rely on taxes from those people.
Yeah.
It's all very complicated. But the idea of taxing the rich being the way to fix all this, no, you're just going to give more money to the government, and they're not really good at doing stuff. I mean, would it be nice if rich people donated to fixing streets and schools and stuff like that? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it would be. Good call. Also, fat people shouldn't be
pause it for a second. I mean,
Donated?
He got stuck in a cul-de-sac here because he just said they can't do stuff because they're probably underfunded, and these local poor areas can't have good services because they can't collect taxes from the people. But that doesn't mean that we should collect taxes from people because government's not going to do anything with it. So even the local governments can't fix their city streets. And then would it be good if rich people donated money to give to fix the streets? Yeah, that would be good, but that's not going to happen. I'm lost here. Let me go to fat
That's why
people.
we need taxation.
Let me go to fat people. Hold on.
Yeah.
I gotta go to a go-to.
He wants the government to be bigger because of the size of the population, but not bigger in any way that is commensurate with the taxes involved here. Just bigger, in big government, big size. Makes no sense.
It's all very complicated, but the idea of taxing the rich being the way to fix all this, no, you're just going to give more money to the government, and they're not really good at doing stuff. I mean, would it be nice if rich people donated to fixing streets and schools and stuff like that? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it would be. Good call. Also, fat people shouldn't be buying fucking fudge rounds with food stamps.
Yeah.
Also, that's not good.
Yeah, and that's a funny.
But also,
that's a conversation that sort of got blown multiple ways, and really, I like to let a song be left up to the interpretation of the listener. But even with that, it's I would love to write a song about. I always thought it was funny to when GM got bailed out of the recession after they made all these terrible decisions. I never understood why I've never understood corporate welfare either to much of an extent. So I do understand the people making that argument.
Well, the corporate welfare argument is that you're going to lose a shitload of jobs. You can preserve those jobs, give those people a loan, they build back up, then they repay the loan. That's what they did, though.
Yeah.
So there's actually some benefit to that.
Government
keeps American
Pause it.
jobs.
So in other words, the government did it. And what would be the problem if the government, in providing that money to GM, said, incidentally, we're part of your shareholders now? All those other people who loaned you money, they got shares because they loaned you money. We're one of those now too.
I mean, he's in a bind here because he keeps bumping up against his desire to not get taxed. He's in a pretzel here because he wants to talk about how the government should do something, but they can't do something. They're underfunded, not enough money, but we can't raise taxes. That's the thing is he can't make a coherent case without saying, I should not have as much money as I do, but I don't want that on air. I mean, and somehow Oliver Anthony's being more coherent than him on this point, even though he supposedly talks about issues related to this on a daily basis.
And incidentally, the corporate welfare, if you can justify it, and I have no problem with the U.S. government bailing out an industry that is failing, but I want returns.
Exactly.
I mean,
demand. You have to unionize those electric vehicles.
If an industry or a major corporation that is too big to fails, it is clear that they can't do the job. The private sector can't do the job. Come in, government money, government has a piece. Period. That's very easy. But incidentally, that corporate welfare that he's promoting here, guess what pays for that? The taxes that 2 minutes ago you said was stupid to give to the government.
Yeah.
Also, I don't think you can buy those fudge rounds on SNAP benefits. Also, you've got food deserts in certain situations.
Right.
But aside from that, I'm not even convinced that this guy that's what he was talking about. Like he's trying to sort of get. He's
He feels
trying to.
uncomfortable. I think. I got it. Maybe I'm too sympathetic to Oliver Anthony. I think he probably wouldn't put the fudge rounds thing in the same way if he had known. Maybe again, this is maybe me giving him way too much credit, but would reiterate that fudge rounds thing. So he seemed to not.
He seemed to
fully
make
own
it like it was a metaphor,
Yeah.
but he's not going to talk about his music. Who knows? But
I mean, he doesn't
continued.
have great politics, but again, like this is this is more about critiquing the guy that has a platform that got $200 million
Right.
from Spotify.
I like
job.
I like the fact that he knows that government can save jobs and create jobs and maintain
It's
jobs.
nice of him to say that right after he said the government can't do anything if it taxes people more.
Right.
So you can preserve those jobs, give those people a loan, they build back up, then they repay the loan. That's what they did, though.
Yeah.
So there's actually some benefit
Yeah.
to that.
So,
Look,
yeah,
it
there's-
keeps American jobs, and it also keeps one of the most iconic American car manufacturers in business. That's good for everybody.
I posit. I know what he's going to go into now is, did you know, Oliver, that we increased the number of manufacturing jobs because of the IRA in this country by 800,000, almost 900,000 jobs over the course of the past 24 months because of these investments, government-directed investments in manufacturing. In other words, in an industrial policy by the U.S. government. Is that what he's going to go with?
No, I
let's-
mean, I will
come
want to. Yeah, okay.
It's a good conversation to have. Like,
It is. Like, what gets bailed out and what doesn't. and
Yeah.
Why. Yeah.
yeah, but ultimately, yeah, I do see a lot of people that aren't taken care of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
You
it's,
know the most used business that didn't get taken care of during the crash? Oh,
So there's an ad there. I will just tell you that what he does a non sequitur to talk about pornography after that. So it's the end of that section there. But
I
that's
saw the
ad there.
caption.
Yeah.
Well,
Great. I'm not sure what the point of that is, but
he was worried about. I mean, he knew he was not making sense. He has enough self-awareness to
Wasn't
know
going
he
in
wasn't
the right
making
way.
any sense.
But
That's-
I want to comment. Robbie Soev and Brennan Dre Gray talked about this clip, and to Brianna's credit, I think she was a little bit over it because they played the first part where Rogan is talking about Rainn Wilson, and the framing is like, look at Joe Rogan being a populist, and they cut it before the section where he's like, yeah, you can't cut rich people's taxes, and I just think it's very interesting how those decisions are.
how the hell is Rainn Wilson and Joe Rogan in any way distinct from each other?
Right, exactly.
well,
Except for Joe Rogan probably has 10 times more money than Rainn Wilson.
He's
Yeah.
more closer to the capitalists.
I mean, but he eats worms and smokes weed and hangs with guys and UFOs, man. You ever consider that, bro? That's the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, he has an aesthetic that's just a little bit, more Massachusettsy or New Jersey, wherever the hell he's from.